Hello everyone. I would like to talk about the ability that we have to really open up to the infinite aspects of life by learning gently. So what does that mean? That means if you suddenly go in an experience where you're out of control based on bad decisions or whatever karmic reasoning there is for your moment, once you see something like that happens, you simply see that regardless of how harsh you collapse because of your failures, if you see there is a sense of vision that can carry on after that experience, you have officially continued into that state of being where you still have a sense of eternal survival. You constantly want to survive till eternity. You just want to go and survive, right? How you become aware of your subtler sense of mind is very important, because that means your relationship to how you think or your thinking process changes. And it's not an intellectual change. It's not any change at all. It's simply a change in your sense of space, in that you begin to see a sense of existential emptiness and a meaninglessness in regards to certain paths in life. Like, so what after I have, all the money I want in the world, all the drugs I want and everything? What happens after that? We see that a great mind needs to be surrounded by great ideas, and great ideas never entrap a man. Great ideas allow mankind to experience more eternal aspects of reality through his self-reflection. You see, our consciousness as a human being is like two mirrors in front of one another. Everything that goes between those mirrors becomes an infinite projection. It has a possibility. What that means is that in some corner of the earth, of the universe called Earth, for story's sake, in regards to language, I'm speaking about this, we see that on this small rock, there are these little beings, tiny, tiny beings, which they call themselves human. But how could energy not consider a holistic intelligence, And you see that these little ants are carrying huge ideas in their head. These little ants on this planet called Earth are carrying huge ideas, and the reason they carry it is because naturally they know. So at times, regardless of whether there's an extraterrestrial, terrestrial consideration of how we look at things, we could be an ant to an eye that is not shaped. And what that means is that for now, we are still, even though the human being has a great ability to imagine things, it still has a certain limitation too. And its limitation is that it's most immediately focused in a reality of physicality, as long as it's living. It's like it's immediately focused. So it means there's the programmer kept an unknown element in how your design was. So the way the universe is expanding and how we are evolving it was never an ape, because it is such complex flux in how we evolve that, our understandings change. It's as if you become an expert in, for example, something, and once you've become an expert in that something, imagine they immediately ban it. Now, once you feel a sense of restriction on an ability you know you have, you are put in a platform where they are asking you, do you want to accept this reality, or do you want to grow and know that it was never this reality because of this changing process, you know? How you see, sometimes people think, okay, I'm thinking, right? So how I'm looking at things, but it's not just how you're looking at things that's very important. It's how you are looking at things, and then how you are looking at that moment. And that moment, its intelligence is, it has so many unknown factors because you're considering yourself to be the known factor. Many people do not understand we are the unknown factor of many other beings as well. And so that means that similar to how perhaps certain animals share partnerships, for example, let's say birds and some kind of Animal Planet buffalo. And you see that the bird, feeds on the buffaloes, whatever. It's like fur or something. This is ridiculous, but the reason I'm saying this is that you see that you become harmonious, and so you begin to cooperate with more harmonious ideas. It's not that you're not gentle, it's that your attention is more comfortable to be on the uncomfortable, because that is what you're looking at. So if nobody turns your head, you're the only one who can move it. And what that means is that you look at life so clearly. You bring every problem you have in life and put it in the eyes of the smallest being, and you take every problem you have in life and put it in the eyes of the greatest being, and you see that if we are in the middle, then our path must be one that is acknowledging all of the spectrum. So there is no longer just one science and trying to, rethink itself constantly. It is a sense of passing the torch, where man is existence's next shape to show itself how much the spectrum can go to infinity. You see, man has certain choices here. And even man's collective body, so in other words, humankind, if all human beings united, sometimes when I talk, I'm talking to that kind of humanity, I don't know, people can wait, but I'm talking to the humanity that can look at itself and know what it is. The true value of life is not one where you push life away comfortably. Some people are stuck in cycles where they do not want to confront things that are constantly coming to their door, but they do not understand that is, in a sense, life trying to shake you and weight you. You can't be wrong if you can see you're right. If you can see yourself being a guilty man, you have the same ability to see yourself as a free man. And you see that symbols have been dictating man's imagination for too long. You see, a symbol doesn't do anything to you. If I just show you something, words don't do anything to you. You read words every day, you become an engineering student, you begin working with geometry, you begin seeing triangles, squares, all normal shapes every day. You don't have these values in it. But because man is a social creature and culture has become an element of man recognizing itself more in regards to where it is, we kind of see that if we allow ourselves to be able to confront the greatest senses of being and the least greatest senses of being, if we are able to confront our spectrums, so it doesn't matter what kind of interpretation you're getting from your environment and analyzing it. It's not about that, see? It's like, for example, think of it in the sense of a heart surgeon. You know, if the guy needs to go in surgery, he puts away everything. It's as if all his priorities, you know, and everything just falls away, and the surgeon immediately goes into that action of knowing what to do. So you see that through life, we are thrown into situations, and that's color. So every experience you've had is adding color. It is a memory, and what are you an awareness of what is here right now, which is memorable, which is conscious. So we want to clearly get an understanding of the nature of modern mind and then decide what kind of, if we're a loser, winner, or whatever. You want to have a sense of existential clarity before you walk in this existence. The unknown, guys, there's two ways of approaching it. You can either fear the unknown, where you're ignoring some ideas which life is telling you you cannot ignore because it's me, you know, it's here, right? Revelation will come to you in a way to gift you with the other end of the polarity. What that means is that once you can, a lot of people just enjoy the cause of their work. They don't enjoy the effect of it. And so now mankind is reaching a maturity where we need to appreciate the cause and effect instantly in the same moment. And so we are constantly in a state of, how do I say it? A blissful ecstasy, where you find your physical vehicle no longer being vehicle, but turning into a wind. And so you see that in your subtle levels of your own self-consideration, you can envision yourself greatly. You can get visions. You can get dreams. You can get an understanding of your most immediate simple. And what happens is there's a holographic matrix kind of setting where you see that there are different layers and dimensions of being. So what happens is, let's say, I'm going to explain Mr.Within and, in a sense, Amin Jabra Ansari's view. This isn't a philosophy, which I am. It's not actually a philosophy, but a collection of writings which I am just providing in my time here. And I want to talk about this in a way where I am going to explain higher consciousness to you, but through a more practical and, in a sense, real way. So we see that sometimes the answers to our problems are not in physical reality. We have a problem in physical reality, but we can't just solve it with physical reality. We need this ability to consider things in much greater ways, so we have our imagination and our creativity and those dreams that inspire us, you know? So, as man, you first begin seeing that before you ask where your God is or who God is, or before you go through asking any deep question, you must see what you are working with first. So you must look at yourself. And so not a lot of people have confronted themselves. They've confronted the hardest thugs. They've confronted the most angriest people, but they have not confronted themselves. And what that means is that they've felt themselves. They've confronted the feeling of themselves, but they have not confronted the visual imagery. So I would advise that if you have a mirror, go in front of it and see your whole self. See completely how you look, and acknowledge first the view of you, just you in the mirror. Then acknowledge how the mirror is teaching you that you and what's behind you, in other words, the background and the wall and the stuff and wherever you are, is also captured in the same lens in one moment. Do you know? you begin then seeing that after you have confronted yourself, you begin being comfortable. Because you see, when two people, for example, I'm going to give you a fight dynamic in regards to how the human psychology, fights, or my experiences or my views on that, at least. So what happens is that we see that two human beings, if they have got in a problem of communication, that means both of their imaginations have agitated to a point where they are creating the other as wrong, more wrong than them, because the other's actions are allowing them to, So what happens when there's anger is there is first an immediate communication from, not an immediate communication, an immediate, in a sense, push off the okay, let me rephrase that. When two people fight, their minds are at play, and so using collective metaphors, you agreeing to certain solid considerations, like for example, this is the ground that we're on, this is the light, this is my hand, this is gravity, this is what the general stuff that you agree to is, in a sense, a very comfortably for you a rooted sense of knowing. So what that means is that you kind of see that it is not about how the wind blows, but actually how one absorbs why they're even being directed. And so when two people fight, they're fighting with themselves. And so mirrors have grown claws and they are fighting. And you see that the only solution and the best solution to any problem ever in your life is to be in that moment before the problem. You have awareness of it. You were a person right before the time you had a problem, okay? Simply go to that awareness, and once you go to that memory will remind you of the state of being that is there. And so, it's very important for human beings to start respecting your thought, or in a sense, not detaching certain interpretations of duality. So what that means is that appreciate your own eyes, because that is what you're given. That is what you're meant to see. And you need to see that the simple things in life are always speaking to you. You're not far off. But you understand that if you're someone who is physically surviving well and you're hearing my talk, that is great. But imagine how many beings entering into this human experience can have as good of an experience as you if their physical needs were solved. And so you don't need to go save everybody immediately like a madman without a plan. You need to strategize, and you need to see the amount of energy you're given which you can contribute. What that means is that I allow myself to take my valuations of my next act through a complete clarity of the present moment with an awareness to different, progressions of my memory. Alan Watts is a very valuable speaker. And in one of his talks, he says, you don't clear a pond or still a pond by hitting it with something. So something like that. And this quote is very, very important, because you see that the approach you have to how you need to solve the problem of how you're not successful or rich or harmonious or abundant is by seeing that as natural design, as a human being, you were not meant to get snapshots of your future too much. As a human being, you'll see once you are navigating through the human instrument, through the sense of vehicle that we have, through this body of being, we see that there is a sense of stillness that is, in a sense, collective and has held everything together. So I look and see that the ground has held all trees. But then there's a sense of individuality, which is another dimension based on just seeing the beauty in just the design of the tree, for example. So similarly, how we see different experiences and different moments are capturing different relationships within one another, we see we are at our peak doing something which I coined as experience tunneling and learning immediately based on how aware we are that we are not this immediate experience. That regardless of this experience tunneling, the experiencer and the object of experience are separate. So a lot of people are positioned into corners of their own room by their own ideas. You can think of things that scare you, bother you. You know? It's like insanity is not really insanity, you know? The insanity that people say is fear. And if you step into the concept, if you try to learn or study the concept of insanity through notions of fear, you will begin seeing that you as a creator were given the free choice to adjust and tune your attention to any reality and in a sense magnify your experience of what you put your attention on. Guys, I want you to see something. I want to bring certain beautiful Zen practices or Zen views into how we can handle the mental mind, but also suggest very elevated paths of how our physicality and how we're maintaining the world around us needs to be our own judgment. So what we find the Western world being, in a sense, is a child with great potentials, but a child that needs to listen to the ancient fathers of the East. And so in a sense, what I mean by that is that it has nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with society. It has to do with the immediate axioms and postulates that our leaders are having for our reality. It's about reality first, and then about anything else you interpret your reality into. So what that means is first, you are acknowledging that reality as an observance of that reality, and then another is an experience of that reality, in which that experience again is having another ability to observe things in different ways. You see, the beauty of solidifying is that you begin to experience the greatest evaporation. You know, eventually after you have more, loosened up and in a sense liquefied your senses of insecurity. You see, insecurity comes from a lack of existential confrontation and experiential confrontation. Let these words echo deep, because you see the mind of man, you see the beauty and of the design of nature. And so words begin becoming your companions after you have reached an honorary and a sense of honor by confronting it. You see, the reason it's important to have a sense of honor is because that's a very important human development. In other words, that's a very amazing mental technology. What that means is that we have these physical technologies that are helping to sustain our lives. For example, cars, phones. And whatever that is in front of you, in a sense, nowadays. You see that the human being needs to see that if it is in the West, in regards to it has a Western mindset. It wants to have fun, party in ways where others have seen to be taboo. And so, there's that kind of development. We need to see the way the West needs to get introduced to its senses of spiritual awareness, or senses of observance, or a sense of knowing as consciousness, is through its creativity. So actually the Western world needs to break more ideas, in a sense, to then more comfortably build great ones. So what happened is, as a human being, so I'll be very frank with you, I was very shy, and I wasn't competent. In other words, I was clumsy, I was stuck in my own confusion, and there was this haze that nobody could see but only I could. And so that's how I passed through. But then I saw there's a moment where you must so deeply look at those memories, those images of your lack of ability, and in a sense, bring them to such simple value where your observance of your own memory is like your observance of an object in such clarity. So it's like, imagine you become so meditative that your memories do not bring any effect to your way of expression, in a sense. So you become still and, in a sense, silent to a degree where conception is no longer running. The projector light begins to go off. So in that moment, everything you have known has only been based on the projector. So when the hologram is, in a sense, switched on and off, you see that the nature of your being was lied to by no one else other than yourself. We create our most greatest ramps because we step into them. And so if I'm walking, and guys, you know how they said I've noticed it's as if media and a lot of entertainment brings emotion over certain actions, and in a sense links the emotion to the action by presenting it repetitively. Repetition begins to be something that if you suddenly constantly repeat one word or one sound and really clearly are looking at it, it will amaze you. You will see it will become something where first there's repetition, there's thoughts. Repetition, you're not even thinking of the repetition. Repetition, it's like suddenly, the way, for example, so I have these Tibetan beads and I go in nature or by the lake and I sit down and my hand just starts moving. And so I'm constantly moving these beads, but in a sense, my hand begins to do it just by its own. It's as if suddenly my awareness to how gently my heart is navigating is allowing my body to learn from the heart. What that means, it doesn't matter if you think if the heart is thinking or not. It matters how much you see that by your own existential allowance and authentic comfort, you are letting your body harmonize, and by realizing that your heart is its immediate idol. And not idol, but in other words, like inspiration. The heart is inspiring your body to be calm and gently progress. And what that means is that the body can even learn from the body, because it is not the body, it is actually the mind within a mind. And so you see, immediately once you destroy a body, another body comes into your conception, because you're not used to being in a state of dynamic awareness where, in a sense, on one level there's no thought, but you're experiencing a sense of omniscient flow of information. So what that means is that your mental circuitry or your mental knots need to be opened by you, and in a sense closed properly if required for use. You want to, in a sense, know that the best way you can give this life your life's work. In other words, you're here and you're like, whatever, I might like, for example, I have a hobby of doing this and I like doing this, but let's say, outside of my hobby, if there was something I would give to mankind, what would it be? And you would see that the great contribution, it's as if like life is in a sense kind of like a game, because you see in life and the messages that we have from many of our, in a sense, leader figures, both in media and anywhere else in history, is that the mind of man conceives itself to be small because that is the beginning step of the staircase. That is how it feels. Once you see that you can release yourself into a moment where you're naturally present with existence, you give your heart an allowance to harmonize your body in a sense. And I'm saying this in a sense a bit metaphorically, but in a sense also knowingly, as if there's some physiological like truths to it too. And you need to look at this. So begin seeing that most of your problems are being self-induced. Because if there was an emergency right now, which you had to immediately react, you'd snap out of your problems. So the problem of the human being is that it communicates in low ways and can't forget it, so keeps remembering it and keeps talking about the problem. The problem and the solution are gentle beings. And what that means is that through gentle eyes, there's no reason for life to be cruel to you, to be angry to you, or to give you something that, you don't deserve. Because guys, many of us are in a sense, at first entrapped or in a sense locked. It's as if we are like preventing ourselves to go achieve our ambitions because we don't have a great enough reality of it and we haven't explored ourselves enough to know. So sometimes you gotta, guys, it's true. Like sometimes you might want to become suddenly a film producer randomly. Spontaneously, you'll see you don't know anything about film. So what do? Well, a journey of 1,000 steps begins with the first step. So you just take one step and you're like, okay, I like the view of 999, and you continue and take these steps, and eventually you see that the true wisdom of the sage was that he learned to appreciate the moment and to be self-aware in regards to how his thoughts were flowing to create a sense of vision. And so in that, when there are certain stops, when you see that you can navigate your awareness to such intricate realities within what you call imagination, which is just an undiscovered nation, you will see that man's greatest ability to co-create is actually with himself. And this co-creation is one of a communication that is constantly transcending itself. What that means is that if me and you sit in a coffee shop and begin talking about deep stuff, we will eventually come with greater ideas. And we'll be like, where are these greater ideas coming up? They're coming from involvement of attention to authentically want to know something. So what that means is, through the rejections that we are given in our childhood, which we feel are aging us, we are in a sense forgetting what beautiful toys are being given to the youth. And what that means is that there's a view of life where you go and you see it's as if everything's against you. You feel as if there's suffering, there's pain, there is the confrontation of death, and who knows what happens after. There are these fears. And you see, every human being has had fear because every human being is a changing process, and fear is simply an interpretation of just an aspect of change, of how your life is changing. In the subtlety of your mind, your truths are very real to you, and that is why you remember them instantly. You see, the maintenance of the human being is best done through an omniscient view, and omniscience means being able to confront more than just your idea. So if you came and if you were born suddenly in this life, and you were one of those people who from the first day, you didn't ask for milk when you were a child, you asked for a book, and you just absorbed knowledge constantly for your whole life, you'd be thinking in the terms of how much thinking, how much seeing can I get done? And you see, think of it this way. Titanic is a great analogy because when the ship was going down, people went into havoc. When you see an outcome, when you see a potential of an effect, actually let me not say potential, when you see an effect that you don't want to confront, you will always be moving towards that because you're seeing that effect, you have to be in the same wavelength of cause. If I'm inside my room and I want to play outside, there's no way I can play outside unless I go out of the room. And what that means is without self-observance, man cannot evolve. And so you see, if you feel certain things have been going slow for you, it's because you haven't confronted certain dimensions of your life where you need to expand your maturity. And guys, maturity is not just physical maturity. And what that means is that you as a being, before you are so convinced about being human, that sense of innocent, unnameable being is one where it has complete pure mental freedom. A nameless man is very hard to judge. It's very hard to punish a nameless guy. Because who are you punishing? How is it that your order in its confrontation of its own chaos dissolves into a chaos that has always or is always creating the order? You see, you are getting thrown between a spectrum of duality, which as a human being is your immediate experience of life. And you see that this experience is a flow. And so we are the receivers of greater co-creations in regards to the intricacy of the platform we're on. So me as a human being right now, enjoy myself the most in my most creative moment where I have dissolved into a sense of collective being. And collective being means that I no longer have individual worries. And you cannot, because you see some people, some yogis, some mystics become so selfless that the only body they feel like they should confront is man's collective body. So they become very great speakers to society. Because you see, the reason the shaman, the rishi, the mystic, the Sufi, the Buddha, every human being and every design is present is so we have a greater opening and ability to acknowledge our moment. Life is fundamentally here for you, but if you play with those fundamentals, life will be the puzzle going back in the box. All the chess pieces going back in the box. You're no longer enjoying the game. You're having a different experience. You're probably eating dinner or something, you know? So, through our self-observance, we begin taking that co-creation, which has always been with something external out of us, and we see that the relationship with our internal reality and external reality is on some level so transparent that there never needed to be a relationship, but on another level, infinitely cyclical in regards to its creativity. Like an ever-expanding sphere, you know, like a sense of knowing that is always using its lower sense of knowing as a stepping stone. Internally, you're involved in stepping stones, which are your own construction of your next, moment. In other words, what are you going to do after you hear my talk? The way that's being constructed, you can, as a being, as self-awareness, appreciate the complexity in your design of life. So in other words, how you are designed, you don't need to, go look at your DNA. You need to see that your DNA is expressive in your most immediate life. You are untouched. And that is why you can touch everything. That is simply why. And so you need to appreciate this nature, because those people agitating themselves and creating dualities and a lot of disturbances begin to see that the sun shines when you're not looking at your shadow. It always shines. Always have great moments of life as your inspiration. Sometimes for me, my inspiration is not just people. It is, I have some great teachers which just their imagery alone is my teacher. Just the way they lived, or just certain elements of how they were, just unlocks into your remembrance a sense of activation of that knowing into another knowing, We see that the internal and the external are confronted together as an origination of the internal and the external. So when that happens, we feel the twist in the infinity sign, and we see the reality of things is actually the ability to be in many potentials of presence, shaped presence actually. Because you need to confront immediately life, because we need to start this with this. We need pilots that begin not in a sense organizing, but naturally through their intuitive ability to be who they are to their fullest and most creative peak, become those who help people to head to the peak of their potential. And that's simply it. Because words are unlocking. So what's happening is that, let's just say these words were just sounds and there was no meaning. What is happening is I'm saying these sounds to you on some level and you're hearing them. And so it's not about the sound. It's about how aware you are that there's a sense of awareness to what is here. Philosophy is asking questions that are too complex. Meditation, mysticism, and anything that is in regards to prayer and self-awareness and these natural things that don't need any translation but need to be part of your life. Both of these are placed to, in a sense, show you the two wings of the plane. When I say you're on a plane, I literally mean you are on a plane of reality. You are on a dimension of existence, but also metaphorically, you're also in the plane of this conversation, which I'm the pilot of. Very metaphorically. So, as we look at this plane, we see that our involvement with our story makes our story more real with us. But if we are extremely involved with our story, so if the Creator is extremely involved with its creation will no longer look at itself as the creation, but as the Creator. When divine attention, or when existential, or any energy, if you feel some beautiful, harmonious, loving energy, or loving feeling, bask in it. Bask in those moments where you feel you can let go and breathe. Bask. Because when you bask in that moment, you begin holding and absorbing it more in your memory. You see, it doesn't matter where you meditate or not. The person who's meditating, who's doing the practice, is keeping himself inspired to experience that reality and that sense of oneness through the nothingness of creation and, Creator. What that means is that I don't want to see competition for limited resources. That is a very arrogant game for human beings to play right now. For a human being to still maintain himself and to feed a financial system means that it still wants to literally get things in life with paper. I mean, for how many years does the human being need to touch a piece of paper and give it to the next guy? It's like the plan of money was so ingenious that it was like two birds with one stone, where their minds of man were being locked into materialistic urges of satisfaction, and at the same time trees were getting destroyed. And so it was a win-win for a being that could not care for what was here, because it cared for somewhere else. When someone begins to be untrue, or in a sense agitated or angered, is because they forget the present moment and they believe they're somewhere else, or they deserve to be somewhere else. Some moments in life, you need to know that you deserve to be somewhere else. But when I say being here, I mean some people, their attention is not clearly there. Not everybody has the clear ability to concentrate because they have not practiced it. They don't have enough images of it to remember because they haven't done the practice. They haven't had enough of natural involvement with things. And what that means is that, for example, if you want money but don't want it enough to go do something about it, then you don't want money. But at the same time, if you are really stuck in a way of thought which you feel is your serenity, the healthiest thing that a human being can do is to become aware of what you are, and so reset yourself and go sit in nature and, in a sense, breathe until you forget who you are. And in that moment, when nature's voice has become your own, just observe what you will do next. Just think of the beauty and the elegance and the magnificent design of the unknown, of the certainty of the Buddha to open his eyes after his enlightenment and to just get up. That doing was being done by itself. The Buddha, the enlightened being, is in a sense not trying anymore, because the trying identity is always suffering. Mental identity, internal reality does not need to suffer, even though it does reflect external suffering. But it's absorbed in it. What that means is that you're the light in the mirror, so you're not even those sense of infinite shapes. You will find that in life, the greatest conversations that you can have with people is ones where they are being authentic. And how do you know they're being authentic? Because their communication is selfless. And that's why you see an authentic being. So it's one thing to be aware of style, but to be a natural allowance of your style to be expressed without you being too involved with it is simply the path to go. The Tao has a quote that says, action through non-action. And you think about this and you're like, whoa, what does that mean? Action through non-action? So I take a step without taking a step? And you begin thinking of the magnificence of the ability for you to consider yourself in greater ways. If you think you have failed, you have forgotten to remember yourself correctly. To remember yourself correctly means that you have not failed. That the individual and the collective are always reaching out to one another and in a sense are the co-creation of all that is holding this existence together. And trust me, it is a deeper gaze. Because similar to how in my gaze, in my experiential observance of the moment, without any need to speak of it, but just being absorbed and in a sense it's not that you lose your identity, but it's that you put it away because you are so excited and present in this energetic moment that your imagination begins to naturally align, and it's like you're no longer thinking, but your thoughts are occurring, similar to how you're allowing other people to, walk around you. Existence is holding itself so intelligently that mankind just goes in awe, and in that awe feels his bliss bodies. So mankind at first is born and it's like, God, this world is dark. And then suddenly goes into this internal sense of self-awareness and observance and suddenly sees the opposite of all the darkness and becomes a being who's just confronted both. And in a sense, as you are absorbed in your wonder, your task has already been done. And so the prophet knew that his task, regardless on many dimensions, was to bring a greater vision for man. And the prophets, all of them, have fulfilled that. But the certainty of man must be in something, or at least in something to be uncertain. So at times you are certain of something because you're uncertain of another thing, So at times I find science avoiding a proper and able way of acknowledging reality because it's a creation from man's mind. So what that means is that if you look from the bottom of the mountain, it's very hard for you to explain how the top is experiencing it. So I find not that there's anything wrong with science on the bottom of the mountain, magnificent views of the coffee shop logos. Guys, just so you know, there are many beautiful countries out there that by your simple observance of them, you can enlighten and bring such great vision. A change in imagery in your environment gives you a new sense of opening into a new sense of identity, which can identify with your greatest work, which can be the spark of it. Once you begin seeing that the pupil in your eye is both a simple and complex design, your appreciation of life becomes so vast. So in other words, the moment you have touched infinity, that means in your awareness, you've experienced an eternal and infinite quality of yourself, or of an emanation of something about you or your awareness. You begin relaxing. And you see that truly a self-aware person is one who is so involved in life that he's not involved in life. He is so looking at the core of life that he understands that there's no longer a thinker. You can ask him a question, but he will respond in the silence of his action. And that is a being which is of a higher nature. Because you see, language is man's biggest disadvantage, because it eludes and in a sense covers the clarity of what is in front of him. It blurs it out. Our own self-talk distracts us from the ability that we can present in the moment. I have known that many times in my life, if I had just shut up in my mind, I would have appreciated and absorbed the moment and given the greatest speeches of my life back then, and knowing I have. You see, the problem is that you are actually an instantaneous experience that is observing, in a sense, cause and effect kind of experience. And I want to say this very simply because you need to look at it simply. Because if you are not looking at it simply, complexity begins with lying to yourself. So in other words, it's our beginning assumptions that suggest where of the mountain we're starting to head to the peak. If you choose to go from the bottom, there's nothing wrong with that. you actually gain a greater wisdom as a natural design, you know? Every flower blooms and, in a sense, sprouts differently. We're not all meant to be the same, but we're all meant to, in a sense, transcend collectively through our similarity. So the greatest way of getting rid of your enemies is not to fight them, but to see why you have given them the mask of a painful experience or something which you don't want to confront. Because guys, life is not a joke. Life is that serious attitude that tells you, hey, I want you to be so authentic with yourself that your own self-talk and lack of ability to focus on your greatest act is kind of like bothering you. You don't need that. You don't need your own distractions because of choosing a wrong approach. You have a certain amount of mental energy and then you get tired and then you need to sleep throughout the day. So if I wake up and regardless of how much I meditate at night, I fall asleep. If I need to, you know. I'm not saying this is a have to, because every being's intention provides their experience differently, you know. And that is not for my judgment or any man's judgment. But our judgment is best utilized when we get rid of it. So man, when he gets rid of judging things, begins to literally feel lighter because there's less things he's seriously bringing into his attention. If you're worried about something and you're caught in that, you know, classic, if you can't beat him, join him scenario, you need to give yourself a breather. And feel that you as existence, as a being that is existing, are allowed to be comfortable in your movement here. So relax and stop being so agitated, because agitation requires energy, and when you take that energy away, you know, and you make it meaningless to see, there's some physical things you can do which are valuable. So in other words, you learn from your own physical experience, which everyone is doing, but more consciously, for example, as an extreme athlete, you know. But at the same time, there are aspects of you which need to be gentle, and so you need to realize that your physiology, your body, is actually not something to ignore in spiritual contexts. What needs to be ignored in spiritual context, or in a sense avoided or not to get entrapped in, is the idea that there is a separation that you cannot see. You can observe all separation in the reality that you call now. Become your greatest lecturer, become your greatest speaker, and confront yourself fully to see that it is all a multidimensional co-creation of one moment of existence. Through the awareness that you are. I find simple words used well have great magnitude. That when Martin Luther King said the word dream, it was electrifying. It woke people up because he just said the word with completely seeing the vision of his dream. What that means is that once you look in the eyes, there are different types of people out there. And there's some people you look in their eyes and you see that they have won because they are already in blissful ecstasy in regards to their completion. So in other words, they are enjoying their cycle rather than suffering through it by constantly attaching to, you know, things that are unnecessary. My friends, these talks are made to show you that there is great beauty in human communication and in a sense human self-communication. And when I say self-communication, I don't mean sit down and talk to yourself. I don't mean make this into some uncomfortable like thing. When I say self-communication, I mean it's not like two different selves communicating between one another. You are observing the concept of a self to see where the communication is originating from and seeing through, in a sense, more liquid-like state of your thoughts, the clarity of steam. You know? You begin to allow yourself to transcend simply because the nature of the mind is transcendental. So the moment you sit back on the chair after thinking you had to go run is in a sense the moment where you're giving yourself an allowance to collectively appreciate your individuation. You don't think God is grateful for his creation if the creation is grateful for the creator? Because we find ourselves to be an individuated aspect within a greater whole, we will understand that a holistic approach will always bring forth abundance regardless of what happens. The mind of man is gentle simply because it does not need to even have the word gentle. Havingness will lead you to a sense of confusion because regardless of how egotistical you are, you will be confronted with an experience that requires you to confront yourself. And so if you thought the certain monsters were scary, if Godzilla was scary, if, certain things were scary for you, you would, in a sense, see that the greatest fear is in your eyes. So once prey and predator look within one another's eyes, that moment belongs to none, belongs to no one. Before death, we acknowledge life because we say we're living. But before acknowledging life, are we dying? And we begin to at times notice that imagination is how different aspects of existence are shaped to individually be able to communicate with one another. But the hologram is, its nature is unique to your own blueprint of design. And so what that means is the pattern and the certain life experiences that you're going through. How you handle your response to karma is by not responding to it. Right? That when one being saying you have karma, you're like, I understand it, I clearly see why it's there, but the way out of it is only through acknowledging that I also don't have karma. That's the only way you can acknowledge it, by seeing the other side and the reality of it and being the absorption and the observance of both. A wise man once said nothing. Much blessings and namaste.